Honestly, this is one of my favorite times of year because all of the best things are happening right now, okay, or getting ready to happen. We're in the middle of March Madness, which is one of the most holy and sacred times of the year. Opening day of baseball is right around the corner. The Masters is coming up. And in 2 weeks, we have Easter, okay? Yeah, absolutely we can cheer for Easter. Now, I'm just going to say it. Maybe you guys can understand this. Do any of you guys have, weirdness with your families around holidays? Does anybody have, situations where holidays, you're like, I like holidays because of what they represent, but then when it gets to, time with your family, you're like, yeah, this is not necessarily what I pictured in my head. Maybe it's Thanksgiving for you, maybe it's Christmas, but there's always that holiday where you gather the family around, and maybe it's an uncle, maybe it's a cousin, maybe it's somebody, but there's always somebody who just makes everything really awkward and weird. And no matter how many conversations that you have with them, they just don't, they seem to lose the thread about what we're trying to do here. It's Thanksgiving. This is for us to come together, to share a meal, to remember all the good things that happen, and you've got that cousin who's like, let me tell you what the government's really doing. And you're like, and what's weird now is it used to be that you could just have the one weird conspiracy theory cousin, but now you've got they've multiplied over the last couple of years. And so now they get into arguments with each other. It's no, your conspiracy is wrong. Here's the true conspiracy. And you're like, can we just eat? Can we just have a nice meal, okay? You guys understand what I'm talking about. Sometimes holidays can get really, really weird. And in church world, Easter can get weird. Here's what I mean by that, okay? And what I'm about to tell you is a true story. There was a church down in Texas. Every crazy story takes place in either Australia, Texas, or Florida. But there was a church down in Texas that decided for their community they're going to put on an Easter pageant. Nothing wrong with that, I'm all for Easter pageants. And it really went over well. It was awesome. Lots of people came to that Easter pageant. Lots of people from other churches came to that Easter pageant. And so the next year, one of the churches said, well, they did an Easter pageant and a lot of our people went. We should do our own Easter pageant and maybe we'll get our people to come to ours and not theirs. Okay, kind of missing the point of Easter, but whatever. And so over the next couple of years, these two churches got into a competition trying to see who could outdo each other with the Easter pageant, okay? It started off, hey, we'll just do a little play. And then, they bring in the live animals, and then they bring in, we got to up it, we got to have the lights, we got to have it all. To the point where this one year, they're like, man, we're going to go all out. We're going to get a crane or a lift, and we're going to have, Jesus, physically rise, and we're going to reenact the actual crucifixion. And it went off spectacularly. So then the next year, they said, well, we're going to top that. And what ended up happening is they stressed their church out so much and their team out so much trying to keep pulling off this bigger and bigger thing that one day the guy that was playing Jesus had basically an exhaustive episode and could not do it. So they had to get backup Jesus to fill in. And backup Jesus did not weigh the same as original Jesus. So when they hoisted him up, they hadn't properly calibrated the weight for the machine. So he goes skyrocketing up and separates his shoulder and then starts screaming. And they're like, wow, this man is really into it. No, he has a separated shoulder. At the same time, across town, at the other church doing their amazing Easter pageant, they forgot to swap out the retractable spear. So when you stab them in the side, it doesn't actually go in, and they forgot. Or somehow, I don't know why you need an actual spear at all, but apparently they had one. And their Jesus actually got stabbed. And at the end of the day, all anybody remembers from this is that two churches got tons of bad press for one of them actually stabbing their Jesus and the other one separating the shoulder of their Jesus. Now, that is a perfect example of missing the point, okay? Now, here's the deal. I'm not against Easter pageants. I'm not even against Easter pageants that go way over the top or whatever, something like that. But when the motivation is I'm trying to outdo the church across town, we've kind of lost the point. We've kind of like missed it. And so here's what I want to do. Like I said, we are 2 weeks away from Easter. And I want to dive into a story today. And I want us to kind of walk through a story where Jesus kind of had to do the same thing. He had to reset his disciples' expectations. He had to tell them, okay, guys, you're missing the point. Let me show you what we're really all about. Because I think sometimes for us, we can fall into that same place where it's like, Easter can be about a million different things. And I want to make sure over the next couple of weeks, we're remembering, okay, this is what it really is all about. So if you have a Bible or a Bible app on your phone, we're going to be in John chapter 4 for basically the entire morning. So if you got a Bible, John chapter 4, starting at verse 1. And we're just going to walk through it and try to draw some lessons out of the text. So John chapter 4, starting right there at verse 1. All right, here's what it says. Now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John, although in fact it was not Jesus who was baptizing, but his disciples. So he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria. All right, let's just stop right there. Here's the scenario, here's the situation. The Pharisees have started to notice that there's this guy named John the Baptist who does a lot of baptizing, hence the name John the Baptist. But now Jesus is on the scene, and he's starting to baptize a lot of people too. And the Pharisees are starting, like there's nothing like drama to just really stir things up. So the Pharisees are like, oh, what's going on there? Looks like Jesus is getting more than John. And Jesus notices that his disciples are starting to hear this. They're starting to pay attention to the whispers. They're starting to get a little nervous. They're like, wait a second. What if John starts to baptize more than us? What if John's numbers are bigger than our numbers? And so Jesus sees this, and it's a weird thing to worry about who gets to baptize more, but that's what was happening. And so Jesus sees that his disciples are starting to pay attention to the whispers, starting to pay attention to like who gets to be big man on campus here in the area. And so Jesus decides, okay, you know what? We're going to go on a field trip. I'm going to take you guys somewhere. We're going to go to Samaria. Now, why does Jesus take them to Samaria? Because nobody in Samaria cares a bit about what's happening in Jerusalem or that area or anything like that. He's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to take you somewhere else. This would be like saying, man, I've got some people in my town that are really fighting over Michigan and Ohio State and which team is the better team and which school is the better school, and they're getting really nasty about it. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take them to New Mexico because nobody in New Mexico cares. So that's kind of what's happening here. Jesus saying, I'm removing you from the situation because it's kind of weird that you're getting upset about who gets to baptize more. All right. So he came to a town, and this is starting in verse 5 again. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You're a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Okay, to just kind of set the stage, Jesus is breaking every single taboo possible here, okay? Not only were men really not supposed to talk to any woman that they were not either married to or related to, but he's also crossing ethnic and cultural boundaries as well. So she's rightfully a little questioning here. She's like, wait, who is this guy? Why is he talking to me? What's going on? The disciples have gone into town to get some food because they're hungry. And so she's a little on guard, and she's right to be. Jesus answered her. Start picking back up in verse 10. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, and did also his sons and his livestock? Basically, she's like, yeah, what are you talking about, man? Jesus answered, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to an eternal life. The woman said to him, Sir, give me this water so I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. Okay, if she seems a little argumentative, she absolutely is. Because once again, put yourself in her shoes. You walk up to get some water. There's some guy here, and he just starts talking to you out of nowhere, and she's probably like, is he hitting on me? Is he like, what's going on? And then he starts talking all this nonsense about like magic living water and stuff like that. And she's just like, okay, how are you even going to do that? Like, where's this water even going to come from? Like, you know what? If you've got this magic water and I'll never be thirsty again, like, go ahead, give it to me. I'll take it right now. And then I don't have to come back here every day and collect water. So she's definitely smart enough to keep her guard up. She definitely knows I don't need it. Whatever it is you're trying to sell me, I don't actually need it. Then, this is what happens in verse 16. He told her, go call your husband and come back. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. Okay, context. I've always heard this story explained completely wrong. Maybe you have too. Normally, when I grew up and I heard this story as, wow, this is a really sinful woman. She's just been married 5 times, and she's living with somebody now. What a horrible, sinful woman. And then I found out that in that day and time, women could not file for divorce. So if she's been married 5 times, what does that mean? 5 times, someone has abandoned her. Maybe somebody died, maybe whatever. But this is not the story of a woman who has been incredibly sinful. I mean, maybe she has. Maybe, we're definitely not going to say no one's perfect. But this is the story of someone who has been abandoned and abused and mistreated over and over and over. And so when Jesus encounters her, the way I heard it growing up was Jesus is like, aha, I've got you. You don't have a husband, that's right. And what you actually come to find out is Jesus is like, yeah, I know your story. I know what's really going on. And so we also have to remember the time of day that this story takes place. Does anybody remember what time it said what time of day it was? Noon. Okay. Has anybody here ever had a job where you had to stock stuff or lift a bunch of heavy things? Like you stock at a grocery store, or you did deliveries or stuff like that? Okay. Has anybody here ever picked up a 24 case of water on your shoulders? Like bottles, 20, okay. Water's not light. Water is heavy, okay? In fact, they would have to go and fill up these big jars of water for their everyday needs. Remember, no indoor plumbing. And so most of the time what would happen is the women of a village, one of the first things they would do in the morning is go to the well and get the daily water needs. Why? Because if you have to carry really heavy water, it's much easier to do it in the cool of the day than at noon. It's hot at noon, or at least it is in a lot of places. Not in Toledo, but I'm still a little bitter about how cold it is in the end of March. It's usually warmer at noon than it is 8 a.m., okay? And so she's going at noon at the heat of the day, at the hottest, one of the hotter parts of the day. Why? Why would she go and not hang out with everybody else who's doing it at 8 a.m.? Because once again, she is tired of all the whispers. She's tired of all the comments. It's much easier for her to go at noon when she knows no one else is going to be there than to go at 8 a.m. and have to hear all the comments about there she is again. We all know her story. We all, she's tired of the sideways glances. She's tired of the, you don't really fit in here. She's tired of the, wonder what she did to deserve that. And so she goes at noon when it's inconvenient and hot, because I would rather be by myself than have to be around a bunch of people who are just simply going to talk bad about me and not care for me. And so when Jesus sees her here in this moment, and he's acknowledging the facts of her life, he's not saying, here's where you've messed up. He's saying, I see you. I actually see you. All right, let's keep going. Her response is kind of interesting. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. If you're feeling like the conversation just took a sudden left turn, you're completely right. Like, wait, what does this have to do with the five husband thing or whatever? So here's what she's doing. She's a very smart woman, okay? And someone has just kind of laid her life out before her. She sees this. She's highly uncomfortable in this situation. And so what does she do? She goes to a topic that she knows would pretty much shut down conversation normally. Because she's like, oh, you're Jewish, I'm Samaritan. Oh, here's a topic that we disagree on. So as soon as I bring it up, we can just have a quick disagreement. We can say, guess we'll have to agree to disagree, and we can go our separate ways. So she brings up the topic, hey, here's where Jewish people believe we're supposed to worship, and here's where Samaritans believe we're supposed to worship, Once again, go back to your Ohio State, Michigan analogy. Oh, I think the best school happens to be in Ann Arbor. I happen to think it's in Cologne. I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree. Let me get my water. See you later. Story's over, okay? She's smart. She's trying to end the conversation. But Jesus is not going to let it just go like that, okay? He's like, hey, yeah, you're right. Right. Some people believe this is over here. Some people believe it's over there. But guess what? There's coming a day and time where you worship is not nearly as important as how you worship. Are you someone who can worship in spirit and in truth? Can you worship in such a way that what's inside you and what the actions of your life are match? To where it's not just giving lip service to something, but it's living it out. And so she's starting to like, okay, wait, this is definitely a conversation I was not expecting. She was trying to end it, and Jesus keeps drawing her in further, telling her like, hey, look, no. There's something else out there that's better. And it's not about place, it's not about time, it's about who you are and what God has done. Once again, one last time, the woman's going to try to get out of this conversation. John chapter 4, verse 25. The woman said, I know that the Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. And in this moment, Jesus tells her, everything you've been waiting for is here and now. Everything that you've been hoping will one day come true is standing before you. Jesus is telling her, like, look, I know life has been hard. And I know life has been tough. And I know that for a really long time, you have been trying to basically just avoid everything and everyone because that's an easier way to live than having to deal with everybody else. But guess what? Something new is here today. Something new is here right now. There is a new chapter. What you thought was just going to be one long chapter until you died, guess what? That's just a smaller chapter, and there's a new story to be told, and I am here to tell you about it. The story is not over. Okay. Now we have a weird break. Watch this, John 4:27. Just then, the disciples returned. and were astonished to find him talking with a woman. But no one asked, "What do you want?" or "Why are you talking with her?" So here come the disciples. They've been off on this little errand. Go get some Subway, get some food, get whatever, come back. So they come back, Oh, look, there's Jesus, and there's a Samaritan woman, and who's going to tell Jesus he's not supposed to talk to her? I can see just Peter looking over at John being like, James is like, I ain't saying nothing. This is where they probably do all look at Peter. It's like, Peter, you're usually the one that blurts something out. Can you tell him that we don't talk to women like that? And so they're all just kind of looking around like, I don't know what to do. And so, all right, next verse, 28. Then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?" They came out of the town and made their way toward him. All right, now this is a little bit confusing. She goes back to the town and it's like, guys, I've met a man and he told me everything I ever did, which is not surprising to them because they're all like, we could tell you that. It's like, it's common knowledge. That's why you don't hang out with us and we don't hang out with you. Why do you think you go at noon and we all go at 8 a.m. to get water? This is not a new story. But everybody responded to her. So what happened? Something must have been so incredibly different in her demeanor. Something must have been so different in the way she looked and acted that they were like, there's something special about what's going on here. They all went out of the town to go see who could have made such a difference in this person's life. Who is the person? What happened that someone who was withdrawn, distant, bitter, isolated is now apparently full of life? And so they're like, well, we're going to go see what made such a difference. All right, back to Jesus and to the disciples. Verse 31. Meanwhile, his disciples urged him, "Rabbi, eat something." Hey, we just went on this big long trip to get food and came back. Here's something. But he said to them, "I have food to eat that you know nothing about." Then his disciples said to each other, "Could someone have brought him food?" I always love the disciples because they're not real quick on the uptake. And it makes me feel better about myself when I'm like, sometimes you're like, I just don't get it. And then you're like, oh, wait, neither did they. So we're all good. Okay. Let's see. Could someone have brought him food? "My food," said Jesus, "is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Don't you have a saying, 'It's still 4 months until harvest'? I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest. Even now, the one who reaps draws a wage and harvests a crop for eternal life, so that the sower and the reaper may be glad together. Thus the saying, 'One sows and another reaps,' is true. I have sent you to reap what you have not worked for. Others have done the hard work, and you have reaped the benefits of their labor." Jesus is telling them, guys. Yes, I know that you brought food, but we just got to see somebody's life changed. I'm not real hungry right now. I'm on cloud 9. If your team makes the Final Four, you're not like, what I need to do? I need to go in the kitchen and make a sandwich right now because you are jumping up and down with joy. Food is not your concern at that moment. And Jesus has just gotten to see someone's life changed. And he's telling me, guys, here's why I brought you here. Remember at the beginning of the chapter, they didn't know it was the beginning of the chapter. Remember, a day or two ago when I said, hey, we're going to go on a field trip because you guys were a little worried that there wasn't enough baptisms to go around? I brought you here because look at this. There's an entire town out here that doesn't know that there's hope, okay? There's a person here that was, as of a few hours ago, thought she had to live the rest of her life in isolation. And guess what? Her life has changed. And that's why we are here. Do you understand how awesome that is? And then he tells them, and you didn't do any of the work for it. You get to show up at the end of the story and see the life changed. Here's what I'm thinking about. I used to be a middle school pastor way back in the day, okay? And I had a boy that was in my small group for all of 6th grade, all of 7th grade, and all of 8th grade. He was in my small group for every spring retreat we did, for every summer camp we did. I used to do these things where I would invite just the guys that were in my group over my house, and we'd have Halo parties on Xbox. Way back in the day. And he was there for all of those. His name was Matt. 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. Poured every bit of energy and spiritual wisdom that I had into this guy, and nothing. No life change, nothing. 8th grade, he graduates. He's going into high school. It's May. I'm like, hey, man, love you. It's been such an honor to have you in my small group, you and all your friends. You're going to love high school. But honestly, nothing happened for 3 years. 3 weeks later, he goes on an introductory high school trip, like they did a summer camp. He comes back from that. He's like, I gave my life to Jesus. And he's like, it was so awesome. The high school pastor, he told me about, just Jesus loves me, and it made sense. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Everything that's coming out of your mouth, I have told you for 3 years. And I got nothing. And the high school guy takes you on one trip for 5 days, and you're like, man, it all just makes sense. He's so wise. I'm like, here's a bill for all the food I gave you over 3. No. Because here's the deal. Somebody plants a seed, somebody waters it, somebody else gets to see the harvest. That's what it means to be Jesus followers. Our job is not to guarantee results. Our job is to love people well. And what Jesus is telling the disciples in this moment is like, you've gotten so concerned over who's getting to get more recognition, us or John and his disciples, that you've completely missed the point. You're getting to see a story of life change right here, right now, that you had nothing to do with. But the story's still not over. All right, picking it back up in verse 39. Many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. He told me everything I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers. They said to the woman, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard it for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world. All right, here's what I want to do. With our time that's remaining for us, I want to make a couple just observations. Some stuff that we can kind of draw from this story. Here's the first one. The world is big and it needs all of us engaging. If you were here last week, Sammy kind of shared this scripture, and I'll just kind of give it again in case you weren't here last week. But Sammy basically spent his entire message talking about only 2 verses. Somehow it takes me 40 verses, what he can do in 2. But here's what he said last week. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. Let's go back to that slide. The world is big and needs all of us engaging. There is a tendency for us to believe when it comes to Easter that it's kind of like, the church has got this. They don't really need me. They don't really need me to engage. Like, churches are always doing something big. Churches are always doing something special. I can probably just kind of sit back and it'll be okay. And the reality is, there are so many people that need hope. There are so many people that need someone in their corner cheering them on and rooting for them. And so I did a little research this past week, and if any of you guys are better statisticians than I am, please see me after the service because I'll make it right at the 11 a.m. But what I discovered is that there are about 600,000 people in the greater Toledo area. So just, Toledo and the surrounding counties, about 600,000. And on Easter Sunday, somewhere between 250,000 and 300,000 of them will be either at church or watching a church service online. So how many people, once again, there's 600,000, which is a town. I just realized we just talked about 600,000. That's a repeating number. Okay. 600,000 people in the Toledo area. And on Easter Sunday, about 300,000 of them will be in church. How many are left over? 50%. Okay, for those people that don't do percentages and do numbers, what's the number? 300,000. Absolutely. 300,000 people need an invitation. That's a lot. That is a lot of people that need someone in their corner. So when I tell you that the world needs all of us engaging, it's because it's true. There are so many people that need an invitation. Here's the next kind of little observation that I can get from this story. Our story is the best invitation. Our story is the best invitation. What made a difference to this whole town? The woman's story. Her changed life was the thing that told everybody else, there's something about Jesus. This woman who was very, very distant and isolated is now full of life. You cannot argue with that. Our story is the best invitation. I love what it said in John 4:39. Many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him. Why? Because of the woman's testimony. He told me everything I did. You can argue facts and you can argue dates and you can argue all of those things and it doesn't convince anybody. What you cannot argue with is the power of a changed life. And your greatest invitation is just simply to say, here's what God did for me. Here's what God did in my life. Because you can't argue with it. You can say, well, I don't believe it's real, but that's fine. Person's different whether you believe it or not. Now, when I share this story, there's always two groups of people I have to talk to. There's the person who's like, yeah, but my story's really bad. In which case I'm always like, cool, good. So's mine. So's a lot of other people's. Like, that's not a disqualifier. The thing about Jesus is like, yes, he takes dead things and brings them back to life. So the crazier your story is the testament to the goodness and love and power of God. It makes no difference whatsoever how crazy your story is. Okay? That one, though, we kind of get. We're kind of like, yeah, you know what? I know Jesus. Like, we've all heard the story of like, and my life was a train wreck. And then Jesus, and it's true. It's good. There's another group of people that are like, yeah, my story's kind of boring. Like, I grew up in a kind of a decent family, and I kind of like didn't really do anything crazy. And one day I gave my life to Jesus, and I kind of been in church ever since. And they're like, how does that change anybody's life? And here's what I have to tell you. I have a story to tell you. I might have told you guys this story before, and if so, just humor me, but I don't know. When my daughter was in second or third grade, she made friends with someone that was 2 doors down that was also second or third grade, And this girl would come over to our house and play with our daughter a lot. I was like, hey, yeah, your friend's over here. And one day she came over and I was like, oh, hey, actually Alicia can't play right now. Alicia, that's my daughter, Alicia is doing some chores, cleaning up her room, stuff like that. Can you come back later and she can play then? And the girl was like, well, can I help her clean her room? I'm like, you want to come in and help us clean our house? Yeah, come on in. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she's got a lot of chores to do today. But come to find out, her house was chaotic. Her house was pretty jacked up. Her house was messed up. And, I hate telling this story because it's a good story, but it makes me cry. And coming to a house that was normal was the most amazing thing for her. And so sometimes you're like, oh my goodness, my story's not that special. My story's not that great. I'm just kind of normal. There are people that will die to be a part of normal. There are people that would give anything to have normal in their life. And so if you're like, man, my story's not that special. My story's not that great. My story's not whatever. It's like, oh, God will do so much with that. God will do amazing things with boring and normal. So let's keep going. I love what Christine Kane says about this. She says, God is able to take the mess of our past and turn it into a message. He takes the trials and tests and turn them into a testimony. Over the next couple of weeks, the best thing you can do is simply to know what your story is. What has God done for you? Because that is going to be the greatest invitation that you have. Next thing I kind of see in this story. There is a satisfaction that only comes from the hard work of seeing lives changed. Think about how happy Jesus was when he saw this woman's life changed. Think about how, like, he was just like, guys, I'm on cloud nine. The disciples were like, what is Jesus, like, what? He's not even hungry. Like, they can't even figure it out. Like, and he's like, there is something so good about seeing a life change. And here's the deal. I want that experience for all of you. I want all of you to get to experience what it feels like to see someone you care about, someone you love, someone that is your friend, have an amazing life-changing encounter with Jesus. You get to be a part of that. And I want that so bad for you. Because it's not just their life that's changed, it's your life that it gets to be changed as well. Your confidence in Jesus grows. Your like desire to be a part of the things of Jesus grows when you see amazing things happening in other people's lives. So let's talk about this real quick. How should we actually go about doing this? Like, I want you to invite, no shame, no, I'm not embarrassed about it at all. I want you to invite every single person you know to Easter Sunday. I just do. And once again, this is not because we're in competition with some other church. As far as I know, I don't know what the Easter plans are, but I don't think we're hoisting anybody up, and I don't, no spears that I'm aware of. But unapologetically, I want you to invite every single person you know to Easter, because I think it matters, and I think life change is something that really happens. But here's what always happens. I'll say something like that, and they're like, but how do I do that? Like, how do I actually go about having do I be like, Bob, I don't want you to go to hell. Please come to church on me on Easter Sunday. How do you actually go about doing it? So here's what we do. We've kind of made it easy for you. All right, we're going to do something the day before Easter called the Big Spring Thing. Put the graphic up on there for me. Yeah, you can cheer for the Big Spring Thing. Okay. Now here's the deal. It's a big egg hunt. We're going to have egg hunts for every age group up to 5th grade. Well, I think we got 4 different divisions, little kids, kindergarten, Evalie, what's the divisions? Okay. We're going to make sure that, 5th graders and 2-year-olds are not competing at the same time, because that's just not fair. So we're going to have 4 different egg hunts based on age group. We're going to have raffles, donuts, bounce house, live animals. We're going to have all that kind of good stuff. Here's why. Not because we need something to do that Saturday morning. Okay? Not because it's like, well, to keep our reputation as a church in this community, we better throw out something out there so we can say we did something. No, we do this so that you have an easy invitation to your friends. We do this because sometimes you have a friend that you're like, if I invite them to a church service, that's not going to go anywhere. They're not ready for it yet. They're still a little bit far away. But I could invite him to an egg hunt. I could invite him to come ride, pet the donkey or sheep or whatever. I don't know. Animals aren't my thing. I can invite them to come, their kids to come have an egg hunt. And that could be a really good first step for them. That could be something that they would say yes to. And it's easy, because you know what? It's so low stakes. Hey, I'm taking my kids to the Big Spring Thing. You also have children. Would you like to come with me? Doesn't take a whole lot. And if they say no, you're not like, oh man, they rejected me forever. No, it's like, oh no, I'm busy that day. It's such low stakes. But we do this as a way to help everybody have an easy invite. It's not a hard thing to say. It's not a hard thing to do. And once again, here's the deal. Like I said, unapologetically, I want everybody here on Easter Sunday. I want everybody here for the Big Spring Thing. But here's the deal. We are not responsible for results. You might give an invitation and they say no, but you've already won. You know why? Because you gave the invitation. We are responsible for what we do. We are not responsible for outcomes. Jesus is responsible for outcomes. Jesus is the one who actually goes about changing lives. We just simply be the people who have been transformed by him, and we invite others into it. That's all we have to do. So to make this even simpler, I want you to start over the next week or two paying attention to the conversations you're having, and I want you to listen for 3 nots, okay? 3 nots. If you hear someone say, number 1, I'm not in church, that is your clue to invite them. For example, Yeah, we just kind of moved here. Oh, where'd you move here from? Well, I moved here from San Diego. Have you found a church yet? No, I'm not in church yet. I haven't found a church, etc. Okay, let me tell you about the greatest church that ever existed called Soma City. Once again, okay, this is not a competition. The fact that our basketball team won the church league is just icing on the cake. It doesn't make us better than anybody else. But, hey, number one, I'm not in church. Well, let me tell you about my church. The second not that I want you to listen for. Man, I was not prepared. Wow. We had a kid, and I thought I was ready to be a dad, and man, I was not prepared for all of this. Or you fill in the blank with whatever situation you hear that. When you hear someone say, I was not prepared, that is a flashing red siren telling you that they need an invitation to church. Because when you are not prepared, you need help. And one of the things that has happened in the last 15 to 20 years that is just screwing everybody over, it's just messing everybody up, is Google. And here's what I mean by that. Everybody now approaches their problems from a sense of, I need to Google that and find the answer. And we think that all the responsibility for solving all of our issues is always if I get more information, I will be better off. But what actually happens is that most people don't need more information, they need a person. They need someone who can help them. We're drowning in information and we're more alone and isolated than we've ever been. And so when you hear someone say, I'm not prepared, what they don't need is 10 facts about how to solve their problem. What they need is, hey, someone in their corner. Why don't you come to my church? Why don't you come let me introduce you to some people that are going to have your back? They might not necessarily know how to solve the problem, but you won't be alone in this. And the third one I want you to pay attention to is just simply this. When you hear someone say things are not going well, it's not going well. Whatever it is, family, job, career, life in general, school. When you hear someone say it's not going well, once again, that is a flashing red siren letting you know they need hope. They need love, they need care, and that is what the church is designed for. We are the people that love. We are the people that care. We are the people that show up. And when you hear one of those nots, not in church, not prepared, not going well, you should take that as an immediate, and here's the deal. It's okay if it's awkward because you're extending hope. It's like, hey, I don't know what you believe, and I'm not necessarily sure like if this is the right time or whatever, but here, I just want to let you know. I go to this church, Soma. There's some amazing people there. They love me really well. And if that's something you'd be interested in, I'd love for you to come with me on Easter. I'd love for you to come with me to the big spring thing. Sounds like you could use some people in your corner. And that's it. That's how we do it. Now, as you start to plan this in your mind, Satan is going to come and tell you that you are not prepared to do it well, that your skill set is not good. And I want to share a quote with you that I have to tell myself a lot. It's from a guy named D.L. Moody. And this is what, he got criticized once for the way he did evangelism. And this is what he said. It is clear that you don't like my way of doing evangelism. You raise some good points. Frankly, I sometimes do not like my way of doing evangelism. But I like my way of doing it better than your way of not doing it. And so sometimes when I start to get the doubt flowing through my am I actually the right person to say this? I mean, I'm on a church staff. They're going to think I'm just like paid representative and I don't really. I have to remind myself, wait a second. My way of doing it is better than Satan's way of not doing it. My way of doing it imperfectly, stumbling, messing up is better than not doing it at all. And so when you start to feel the doubt the next week or two and you're like, should I say that? I'm going to get tongue-tied. I'm not good with words. It doesn't matter. Your way of doing it is better than Satan's way of not doing it. I'll tell you what, I'm going to make it even easier. Out at the Connect counter. In fact, actually, host team, I didn't even think about this. Can you grab some of those off the Connect counter and just hand them to people on their way out? We've got these little cards. One side says Easter with Soma. The other side says Big Spring Thing. And if you need something to hide behind as you give the invitation, these are for you. Grab 2 of them, grab 3 of them, grab however many you want. And we would love for you to just be able to say, hey, here's something I'm doing. Here's the information on it. Love to have you come with me. So you don't have to remember details. You don't have to remember times. It's all on these little cards. We've got it ready to go for you. Because once again, this is not about competing with the church down the street. This is not about making ourselves feel good and giving us a pat on the back. This is about seeing lives changed. This is about seeing someone who thought that the rest of their life was going to be one big, long story that ended in tragedy. Get to find out, no. That's just a chapter. And there's a new chapter there. What is the value of your friends? What is the value of the people that you love? What is the value of your neighbors and your coworkers? Because Jesus can change any story. No matter how dark that chapter is, he can create a new one. And this is what we are about. This is what we're going to do. And we're going to make it big on Easter, but guess what? We're going to make it big the week after Easter and the week after that and the week after that and the week after that, because people need hope, people need love, people need to understand life is better with Jesus. And this is what we're about. So I'm going to pray, we're going to worship, and then as you guys leave, make sure to grab some of these because Jesus changes everything. Let's pray.